Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we are going to be continuing on with our C# tutorial series, and in this tutorial we are going to be taking a look at casting in C#. Now, C# supports two different kinds of casting, and those two types of casting are implicit and explicit casting. Now, before we talk about what those two types of casting are, what exactly is casting to begin with, or type casting? Well, casting is essentially converting a variable from one type to another. Now, when we talk about implicit casting, implicit casting is the conversion from one data type to another in a safe manner without data loss. Implicit casting is done by .NET at runtime, or at compile time, rather. So when your app compiles, if it sees that you need to somewhere in your code you need to convert from one type to another, and there won't be any data loss, .NET will do that for you. If it sees that you can't, if it sees that it can't do that, then it'll throw an exception or an error, and it won't compile. It'll throw a compile error. Right? However, explicit casting is the unsafe way of converting types, because explicit casting means you're explicitly telling .NET to convert from one type to another, even at the risk of potential data loss. So let's go into an example here, and we're going to use two integer types, the normal int, and then a much larger integer type called a long, to demonstrate what I'm talking about here. So let's say we have an int called a, and we have this set to 25. And we do a long called b, and we set it to equal to the value of a. This is what we call implicit casting, because as it stands right now, you can convert a normal int to a long without data loss, because a long can be a much bigger whole number than an integer, and because this is such a small number, there's not going to be any data loss. An integer has a much smaller minimum and maximum values than long, so it can go into a long just fine, no data loss. That is implicit casting. Now, if we do that the other way around, you cannot implicitly cast a long to an integer, because there will be potential data loss. So you have to explicitly tell it to cast it. And to do explicit casting, right, we can say, let's say we have an integer, or rather we have a long. Right, so we can have a long, and we can call it, okay, come on, Visual Studio. So we have a long, and we call it C. And let's say we want this to be a value of 150 billion. Right? So 150 billion is our long value. Pretty straightforward. And we want, and so we want excuse me. We want int d to be equal to that value that's stored in the long, despite the fact that there could be potential data loss from any, like, for example, the long going out of bounds of the integer. To do that, you can say int in parentheses. This is what we call a casting operator. It tells .NET, hey, cast this to whatever type this is anyway, despite the fact that I know there could be data loss and you can't do this on your own, so I'm going to force you to do it. And then right after the closing parenthesis, do C, like that. You give it whichever variable you want to cast to that type in the parentheses. And so that is explicit casting. That's how you do. That's how you explicitly cast from one type to another. You're forcing .NET to do it, even though you could experience some loss of data. That explicit casting, again, is much more dangerous. It could work. It could not work. Things could royally mess up. Things could break. And you want to be very careful about how you use explicit casting. Implicit casting is a lot safer. But there are times when you just can't use implicit and you have to use explicit. But again, you have to be very careful about how you use it. So that pretty much does it for this video, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.